This October, we are going on a journey. We will see how a fantastic low-budget horror film can get turned into a horrible, over-budgeted husk of itself. Truly a horror story in and of itself. But seriously, we are going to go through every single movie in the Ju-On franchise, starting from Ju-On the Curse to Ju-On the End. The End? Ju-On 5. I can't be fucked to look up what that movie is because I am sure that it's gonna be bad. Mind you, I haven't watched it yet, so let's see here. We'll see when we get there, okay? But before we begin the story of Ju-On, we should look at Takashi Shimizu's two short films. Katasumi and 4. Katasumi and 10 Fours were originally shorts, part of an anthology movie called School Ghost Story G, with the G standing for G, because that's how consonants work in Japan, at least. In total, these both add up to 6 minutes. So there's not much to say, really. But there's a few notable firsts in these. 10 Fours features the first appearance of Toshio and Tsuyoshi. Katasumi features Kana and, more importantly, Takako Fuji in her first appearance as the iconic Kayako. These shorts almost feel like deleted scenes from The Curse. You just have to ignore that Toshio and Kana have obviously very different actors who look very different than the ones that actually play them. Now we're moving on to our actual first entry, Ju-On the Curse. This was released just 2 years later after School Ghost Stories G, and it is a testament to how much a director can achieve with very limited resources. The Curse and its sequel were originally V-Cinema releases, meaning that they went directly to video, which meant that Shimizu had literally no budget. The budgetary limitations are greatly covered up by The Curse's structure. The Curse sets the standard for what would become the Ju-On franchise. It's broken up into different segments told from different points of view and taking place at different times. Among these segments are actually a few actors who went on to do a decent amount of work. Yurei Yanagi plays Toshio's schoolteacher. He was also in The Ring, but more importantly to us, he was in Helldriver, so you can go watch my review of it now. Hitomi and her sister Asumi also starred together in Hideki Anno's Love and Pop, which is another movie I reviewed, and you can go watch on my channel. Chiaki Kuriyama was not only in Battle Royale, but also a little film called Kill Bill, neither of which I reviewed, so I don't care about them and you shouldn't watch them. But with the segmented structure, the actors really don't get a lot of time to shine. While that does make it harder to get attached to a character, the segmented story gives the film room to breathe. Just when you feel a segment is starting to drag, it ends, and the next one picks up again. But this also sets up an intriguing mystery. With all the segments jumbled up into a mess, it's the audience's job to piece it all back together. Slowly, the audience gets a feeling for how the curse works, who it targets, without ever having the movie slow down, stop itself, and explain the whole thing to them bit by bit. Both the curse and its sequel were shot in 9 days. With a huge time crunch and no budget, Shimizu was basically forced to go the slow and subtle route, instead of going for cheap jump scares. The first ghost doesn't appear on screen until 20 minutes into the film. That doesn't mean there aren't plenty of bloody bits sprinkled in where they can. The effects are obviously not the best, but the low video quality actually does hide how poor looking some of these effects are. But speaking of cutting costs, The Curse 2 fares far worse. 30 minutes are recycled from the first movie in this 70-minute sequel. The new segments flow easily enough from the first, almost as if they were originally part of the same movie. So you're left with 30 minutes of old material and 40 minutes of new material that feels like it was just separated from the first. I found a fan edit that cobbles them both together, and as someone who has seen both these movies separately, I definitely prefer this edit. The sequel concludes the plot lines from the first, with the extra 40 minutes bringing the whole thing to a 2-hour feature-length movie. A few certain scenes that are definitely trying to be scary when they might come off as more comically low budget. But overall, it feels like an extension of the first. The Curse is a perfect example of using your limited resources to their most effectiveness. What could have easily been an overdone and cheesy horror movie manages to be one of the most effective. The Curse was a very good start to the Ju-on franchise, and a few years later, we would have our first theatrical Ju-on. That would of course be Ju-on the Grudge. Ju-on the Curse was a huge success. It was so successful that 4 years later, the director decided to totally sell out.
Money! It's a gas. Grab that cash with both hands and make a stash.
But 2 years before selling out, Shimizu released the first theatrical Ju-on, and that is what we are talking about now. Now that the franchise is reaching out of the straight-to-video market, it needed to make some changes for a wider audience. The Curse could be described as a bunch of short films strung together on a VHS. The Grudge centers the plot a little bit more around a singular character. Rika serves as the closest thing to a protagonist this film has. She's a prominent character in 3 of the film segments dispersed over the course of the movie. Although there are many subplots and characters that just never interact with Rika, her story gives us a nice through line for the film. And now with a budget, The Grudge can afford a soundtrack. It's very effective when used properly, but there are a couple times I think where it would have been more effective without the music. Toshio doesn't need a music cue every time he appears. But that's not to say that the soundtrack isn't used well when it, is used well. The soundtrack can build tension in scenes that definitely need it. Now armed with actual cash, Shimizu could hire actual actors for The Grudge. Of course, Takashi Matsuyama and Takako Fuji return as Takio and Kayako, respectively. Toshio was replaced, which will become a recurring theme in Ju-on. Those kids don't stay young forever, even when they're dead. The Grudge stars J-pop singer Megumi Okina, playing basically the starring role as Rika. Yoji Tanaka gets his own segment. He's in fucking everything, including Summer Wars and Kill Bill. Kanji Suda gets to play his psychotic husband. He was also a recurring character in Kamen Rider Ryuki. He was in a few different Beat Takeshi movies, and he's been in pretty much fucking everything else as well. The bounce up in budget from The Curse to The Grudge is impossible not to notice. Everything looks a lot nicer, but is also a little harder to hide poor effects. On cheap video, effects look realer. On film, they look faker. Thankfully, the cheaper effects are a small portion of this film. Just as The Curse did before, The Grudge builds tension before it kills. And this has probably some of the most memorable spooks in the whole franchise. The Hitomi and Kayako segments have some of what I would consider the best scenes in horror in the entire genre. The ideal Ju-on segment is a slow burn, escalating to a chilling conclusion. The Grudge has some of horror's best ramp-ups, and Shimizu knows how to leave his viewers with a sense of unease right up until the end of the film. Overall, Ju-on makes the transition from no-budget video rental to well-funded theatrical movie more smoothly than anyone would have thought. But there's still plenty more bumps in the road, and we will continue on with this franchise with Ju-on the Grudge 2. The Grudge left off on a downer ending. Its sequel lightens things up by starting with a miscarriage. The Grudge 2 was released just a year later, and ends up completely selling out the series by being the best in the franchise. Spoiler alert for my opinions. The Grudge 2 is one of those strange sequels that could arguably be considered better than the 3 before it.
Yes. It's a lot like Star Trek: The Next Generation. In many ways, it's superior, but will never be as recognized as the original.
This is odd for a sequel. This is nearly impossible for a horror sequel. This should not be for a horror sequel that is the 4th in line. While The Grudge had a vaguely main character to provide a sort of through line for the audience, the plot would still spread out and go off into different directions. Ju-on 2 is a completely different beast. Its focus is on a small handful of people. In a way, this is the closest we have to a slasher film so far. The characters are all part of a film crew that makes the wise decision to film inside the old Saiki house. Of course, this ends badly in the long run as Kayako and Toshio start picking them off one by one. With a smaller scope and narrative, there's actually some time for character development. Our main character is very much a main character this time around, as most of the film's events focus solely on her. Kyoko is the main target of Kayako's wrath, having mysteriously stayed pregnant after her very apparent miscarriage. Kyoko is played by Noriko Sakai, who everyone should know sang Active Heart for Gunbuster. But of course, the real star here is Shingo Katsurayama, reprising his role from Kamen Rider Kuga as Ichijo, who has quit the police force to become a television producer. Truly, this is one hell of a sequel. While there's more time to develop the characters, The Grudge 2 also now has more time to play around with, well, time itself. While we had previously seen Izumi's stories overlap with her father's in a weird flash-forward flashback, Tomoko and Chiharu's chapters take it up to a new level. Not only does Tomoko's segment take place at the same time as Megumi's chapter, but the events surrounding her death are subject to some very eerie time shenanigans. At Tomoko's apartment, we hear a strange thudding sound, which is later revealed to be the thudding of her and her boyfriend's corpses, but in the future. Of course, saying it like that makes it sound stupid, but the scene unfolds very slowly and only starts to give you hints about what's going on. And ultimately, it hammers down the hard truth that once cursed, no one can escape the Grudge. Chiharu, a minor character from the first Grudge movie, gets a chapter that's arguably the climax of the film, and goes for a complete mindfuck. The unreliable narrative present in this chapter is very reminiscent of Shimizu's later film, Marebito. Much like any chapter in The Grudge, this one ends on a downer note, but the ends in The Grudge 2 feel more malicious than we've seen before. Now with The Grudge 2, we have 2 confirmations about the film's universe. There is an afterlife, and your loved ones can protect you from malicious spirits. But even that is not enough to save you from the Grudge itself. The second you step foot in that doorway, you are fucking dead. Perhaps it's because there is a lot more shown on screen than off screen, but Kayako feels a lot more brutal in this one. She was never exactly a morally sound killer ghost, but the previous movies felt more like a vengeful spirit lashing out in anger without really thinking. In The Grudge 2, Kayako is straight up a slasher villain. She is portrayed as an unstoppable pure evil, with Toshio as her lackey. In the end, Kayako rebirths herself from Kyoko. To me, this just feels strange. The devil rebirths himself in human flesh. Ultimate evil rebirths itself in human flesh. Kayako was a creepy mom with a crush on her kid's teacher, not some Lovecraftian abomination. And here's where we see the first signs of cracks in Ju-on. The Grudge 2 compromises a lot of Ju-on's typical conventions, but that's for the sake of giving us something new. And although I might gripe about consistency, as a film, The Grudge 2 might just be the most solid. Out of all of them, it is by far the most tightly written and well acted. But the fact that it has to start making these sacrifices in consistency just shows that 4 films was more than enough for this franchise. Hell, most film series only get one good movie before going to complete shit. Insert an image of anything here. Ju-on was lucky enough to get 4 good ones, and Takashi Shimizu knew this, which is why he put the series to rest at The Grudge 2. So with that, its legacy would never be tarnished just to make a quick buck. Until 2009 when we got a Ju-on reboot.
Money, it's a gas.